on today's World Insight. China's national carbon market now open for business. What big difference can the market make in achieving the country's carbon cut targets?
They want the trade system to help with China's carbon emission reduction, but doesn't want it to have a compromise any of our economic development.
And Britain, coping with a new surge in COVID infections. A cautionary tale of opening up too soon amid the pandemic. A pharmaceutical company top executive with direct answers. Here is our host, Tian Wei.
Hello and welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. China's national carbon market opened for business on July the 16th. Over 2,000 power generation companies are part of the market, which covers over 4.5 billion tons of carbon emission a year. It replaces the European Union's carbon trading program as the world's largest such mechanism. It is a landmark practice that experts said will not only help speed up the cut in domestic carbon emissions, but also promote a broader global response to climate change. So how does exactly a carbon market work? How does it fit into China's challenging 2030 and 2060 carbon goals? Let's loop in our panelists from different parts of the world. For Carbon Market in Durham, Jackson Irwin, Senior Fellow at the Nicholas Institute for Environmental Policy Solutions. Meanwhile, we are also joined in Beijing, Zhao Xiaolu, Climate Director with Environmental Defense Fund's China Program. In Beijing, Ma Jun, Director of the Institute of Public and Environmental Affairs. And last but not least, Yi Yangshen, Director of Inclusive Development Research Center. Great to see all of you. Mr. Ma, I want to start with you. After expecting for a long time, finally, China's the first ever carbon trading market began trading last Friday. Tell me more about whether, after following it for a long time, preparing for it, satisfied with the first day of operation.
Yeah, the first day of operation got everyone excited. It went on smoothly with quite a volume of trade, and the carbon price also set at the level that people, experts predicted. This price is extremely low in comparison with, especially with the mature market of EU trading system. Having said that, EU also got a long period of low price, and I think this the regulator doesn't want it to be either too high or too low. So I have to say, at this moment, they want the trade system to help with China's carbon emission reduction, but doesn't want it to have a compromise any of our economic development.
Well, the U.S. does not have a national emissions trading system. It has a series of subnational systems similar in some ways to the pilot systems that China had rolled out previously to this national launch. So in that regard, China has taken a step forward on national carbon pricing that the U.S. has thus far resisted.
Looking at China, Mr. Ma, you know, the data is a big issue because without assessment, without ability to go back and look at the data, there's, you know, whether you have a carbon market or not, it really doesn't make sense. So you work at the very beginning on the data issue. How is it so far?
Actually, more than 5 years. We've been trying to advocate for the disclosure of the carbon emission data. So far, some progress have been made. You know, the temporary rules of this carbon trade market requires major emitters joining this program to disclose their carbon emission data. Having said that, most of them have not fulfilled this requirement yet, and but it's encouraging to see 5 provinces started disclosing some of the large emitters' carbon data.
And what are these 5 provinces? Could you name them?
they're not all in the coastal developed regions. Actually, some of the western regions have been the front runner, like Sichuan, including Sichuan and Shanxi and Shanxi and Jiangxi and this kind of provinces. And we have compiled this data. So there's a clear gap in the disclosure and also in the accounting. So I think without a open source disclosure of this carbon data, this market can hardly fulfill its goal to help reduce the carbon emission in a more cost-effective way. So our cap and treat, even with the cap, is a cap on the based on intensity control and not on absolute volume.
Right.
So this leaves, in theory, some space for the latecomers to continue to develop, continue to before they pick their carbon emission.
Mr. Shen, the issue is about a balance, right? And the rhythm. The economic development this time with the pandemic and everything and geopolitics, things needs to be further considered. It's not like a black and white issue. So how do you look at the pace and the balance issue?
Well, this is definitely a big concern for, Western provinces, including a lot of developing countries. I mean, those African and Southeast Asian countries. I think there will be solutions for this. For example, in Western China, so their economic development is not that advanced comparing the coastal cities. However, Western provinces they have big resource for solar and wind. So in the future, I mean, developing those clean energy in Western provinces will get, I think, bigger benefits for them, especially through the carbon trading system. So I think this will be good for them. We have to also, taking care of so-called inclusive growth issues for Western provinces. China now building, great railway system, great road system, and also I think the consumption market in China is also going to be unified.
I've actually noticed a very interesting evidence while talking with aluminum sectors. A lot of the companies or the plants are actually moving to the west part of the China because they have significant renewable resources. And although they are not included in the current power national carbon market, they are expected to be included soon. So this already climate change are becoming a more and more significant decision power of their company strategic planning.
So let me go to you, Mr. Oring, about that too. Every country has their own development stage, right? China's economy, as we mentioned earlier, already has its uniqueness. So how do you see, looking from afar, this time, the balance and the rhythm thing?
The important consideration at this moment in time on that question is about what policies are most impactful on China's environmental and economic performance. And when we look at that, we see a number of pollution regulation measures, a number of plans through the 5-year plan, for example, the carbon peaking plan for 2030, the net neutrality target for 2060, all of which are having these sorts of effects on the strategic planning of companies and on their environmental performance. The vision for the carbon market is that over time, the standards and requirements that it places on these companies will become stricter and stricter. I don't think that it's there yet, nor is it intended to be. But ultimately, it is designed to be a flexible tool to try to balance the economic growth needs not only of the highly developed eastern and southern cities and provinces, but a tool that can be complementary in ways that brings the strengths of the different parts of China's economy together. And the final point to note is that the pilots were designed with that in mind. and covered different cities, different provinces that had different economic and social characteristics to give some lessons about how this market could operate in different parts of the country.
You need other policy tools if you truly want to have a more inclusive and balanced development. For example, Beijing, in our index assessment, has been the front runner among all the provinces. But because we have phased out all the coal power plants, having said that, Beijing now is dependent more than 70% of its power electricity from major carbon-intensive provinces like Inner Mongolia, Shanxi, and Hebei. And so now most of the power we imported into Beijing are actually based on coal power. So we need we suggest that there should be a policy for the requirements of increasing proportion of green electricity based on renewables. Actually, in those western regions, especially in the Mongolia, it has a very, very good capacity, resources on solar power, wind power, of course, coal power as well. But now it only want to focus on coal power because it's a much easier path toward economic development.
Let me ask you, Mr. Ma, since you're an expert, you probably have all the numbers in mind. I was told by some estimates, 2030-2060 agenda commitment, 50%, as we know today, with the current technology, with renewable energy, and with policy shifting, likely to be achieved. There are also 50% that's almost impossible to be achieved with the current technological development and innovation, which means we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen. So tell me more about what do we know and what we don't know.
Yeah, you're right. You're right. That's why we call this 40-year-long commitment ambitious, because now we're having more than 10 billion tons of carbon emission that we need to neutralize. As you said, part of that, we know that, like on the power industry, we know the path already. But to some other industries, like on the iron, steel, cement, we're not that clear. Transportation, building, lifestyle. There are many uncertainties here. So innovative solutions must be innovation must be the real solutions. So how to generate that incentive? I think this market solution is very, very important. Cap and trade is one of them. Green finance and green supply chain. All these are all market-based solutions that we need to look into.
I actually want to second Mr. Ma's point. The value of China launching a national carbon means China finally has a price of carbon. So that means not only the power generation company will be influenced, all of the financial sectors are looking at this. So they will use the price as their determination for investment for the future. For example, a coal power plant will last for 40, 50, or 60 years. With price of carbon, this investment are no longer valuable.
You have the labor cost, you have the raw material cost, you also have transportation logistic cost, and of course the system cost in a way, how system governance is being done in different markets. That's how you think about businesses. But now there's one extra thing that's called carbon price coming in, not only just within your own national border, but also beyond to the region and worldwide, hopefully. So what would that mean for logic of business? That's a very interesting thing. Mr. Irwin.
Certainly, fundamentally, it's a recognition that we have to price the externalities of our business activities if we want to see them decline, particularly for negative externalities like greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
You mentioned that this extends beyond China's borders or the borders of any country, and that brings into question the importance of where we might see intersections of carbon pricing with international trade. There's already signs through Europe's carbon border adjustment mechanism policy, which was just released last week,
Right.
that this will have a growing footprint not only in bilateral trade relationships, but in multilateral accounting across the embedded greenhouse gas emissions and traded products. And ultimately on up to the fully international level at the World Trade Organization. When I mentioned the WTO, one of the avenues that I refer to is the fact that the carbon border adjustment measures put in place by the European Union and potentially put in place by the US and other countries in the future will likely be challenged at the WTO along those grounds. It will be argued that they're simply trying to protect domestic industry rather than really seeking to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of their importations. So it's by no means an easy pathway forward. But one of the important outstanding issues that continues to be negotiated through the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change also intersects with this issue area in that it seeks to find ways to share mitigation outcomes, essentially trade carbon credits across different borders,
Right.
And have those accounted for in the international system effectively. It's been a sticking point in negotiations really since the Paris Agreement, but there is some optimism that either this year or in the years to come, we'll find some system that can meet all of the demands there.
Yeah. So how are we going to see the largest, one of the largest trading countries in the world, having its impact on the trade policy regarding carbon? I mean, this is going to be one of the most sticking point we're going to see in trade negotiations and beyond, and geopolitics as well.
And so there are some in the US policy apparatus that would argue that this equates to a shadow carbon price, and in fact, a recognition of the need to reduce carbon in both the products that are produced and consumed in the US and those that are produced and exported. And so that should be recognized in these sorts of trade arrangements that are made that relate to embedded greenhouse gas emissions themselves.
All right.
It's certainly
if I could
getting
just, with my ignorance of the expertise knowledge, what is the carbon trading price for the U.S. market? If you say there is something like a shadow pricing, what exactly is it recently?
That's a good question. There is no answer at present because that is being debated and calculated as a potential response to the future European carbon border adjustment. It's not a calculation that has ever had to be made for the sorts of trade arrangements that we're talking about now.
Very interesting situations. Mr. Shen.
Yes.
Also about this, about trade and carbon trading, very much likely it's going to be the sticking point. As someone who's been working as an energy consultant for Asian Development Bank earlier, what do you think about that?
I think in the future, there will be definitely a lot of Chinese companies which cannot fulfill all these requirements will be affected by these measures. But on the other hand, we also have early birds, those Chinese companies or even companies from Vietnam, from India, those developing countries. They can, catch the opportunity, become green, and also they have the mechanism to reduce the carbon emission and set up this carbon, assets. Then they will be, catch more opportunities for the market. Yeah, I think it will not a very bad thing. I think it will be encouraging those companies who want to become green, and they will catch the opportunities.
Mr. Ma, final points from you as well.
Thank you. Yeah, because the EU have a more stringent policy and a higher price, carbon price, so it concerned that this may lead to a carbon leakage. So they want to have a border adjustment tax. And those companies supply, especially part of the global supply chain in China, must be prepared for that. Recently, we have seen many of them coming to us, to try to take advantage of our digital carbon accounting platform to first understand how much they emit and then set a science-based target based on that. I think this is a good start for the preparation of something that will happen.
It's a very exciting start. First, China's trading market began operation last Friday. Certainly, it's also the largest in the world already. So we'll see how things will evolve from here. It's not just about the carbon emission. It's also about how we look at where our industrial policies will be and how our economic planning will be like for all of us. Thank you so much for every one of you for your contribution. Thank you. You're watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei. Coming up, the United Kingdom is coping with a new surge in COVID infections due to the new variant. A cautionary tale of opening up too soon amid the pandemic. A pharmaceutical company top executive with direct answers next. Welcome back. This is World Insight. I'm Tian Wei. Earlier, the UK planned on easing restrictions for COVID prevention and control, but for the very first time since January, more than 50,000 confirmed cases have been reported in a single day last week after the easing of restrictions, prompting worries over another lockdown. So are vaccines effective? Can vaccination really create the herd immunity as people expect it to? I talked to Dr. Belén Garrido, the chairwoman of the executive board and CEO of Merck, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world, and also one of the most important suppliers of raw materials for COVID-19 vaccines. I'm so glad to be joined by Belén Garrido, chairwoman of the executive board and CEO of Merck.
Thank you very much. Very, very glad to talk to you today, Tian Wei.
You look wonderful, but I know there are a lot of things on your mind. The Delta variant is one of those big concerns for the world. What about from your professional perspective? How do you see the vaccines these days functioning against that?
Having been able to develop a vaccine, several vaccines in such a record time is really a breakthrough achievement of science. Today, the availability of the vaccine has so significantly contributed to addressing the global health crisis overall. And we see better and better data as the vaccination rate picks up in different countries. Are we off completely of the pandemic? The answer is no. The vaccine is really helping to a great extent, but we still need to be cautious because, first of all, there is a percentage of patients. Remember, the efficacy rate is diverse, and there is a percentage of patients who will not deliver immunity to the vaccine for any reason. The durability of the immunity is still being studied. And at the end, we still need to be cautious. We still need to keep the hygiene measures that we have been so much used to during the former phases of the pandemic.
Right.
We need to take into consideration that it's going to take time to better understand what is the efficacy of the current vaccines to the new variants. I think most of the vaccines manufacturers have already studied and delivered initial results, and those are promising, but not yet helping conclusions.
It seems that there are outbreaks already happening in the United States, for example, even among the population that have been intensely vaccinated. It's also the similar cases that we see in the UK and some other places. Now, are you worried? What do you see should be the most functioning next step, Belén?
For the time being, we need to accelerate the uptake of the available vaccines everywhere, everywhere globally, and then keep ourselves safe with the hygiene measures, using the mask whenever it's necessary, social distancing, and everything that we have learned so well during the last few months.
Right.
We have been at the forefront of this pandemic, playing a leadership role, supporting more than 50 vaccine manufacturers, and plenty of the diagnostics that has been developed, and many of the therapeutics through our life science business. Piece of information that we receive that is compelling is further illustrating and shedding light on a highly complicated issue. And it's only data that will take a little bit of time to develop that will clarify some of the questions. For now, vaccinating is definitely making a huge impact on the dynamics of the pandemic. And we see a correlation between vaccination rates and obviously infection rates. But what everybody has to understand is that the world is not off the hook, and we still have to stay very, very disciplined.
For leaders like you, business leaders like you, who are dealing with a pandemic on the front line, but at the same time have to look at potential other crises and dangers in terms of human health, how are you going to streamline your resources, priorities, time, energy? These are critical choices you have to make on a daily basis, I have to say. But then tell me more about, as a business leader, how do you look at these widespread possibilities and deal with them on a daily and a long-term basis? Berlin.
As a family-owned company, and as a company which has been in business for 350 years, we are extremely well placed to have this long-term perspective while still keeping the right balance with the quarterly results, to give you an example. So I think Merck is a company that is extremely well equipped to address major megatrends and major challenges facing humanity. Advanced materials, biotech, biology, digitalization, data. Our three sectors are extremely well placed to address those megatrends. As a business leader, we need to do those strategic scenarios that can influence and disrupt our business. And we do that very often. Then we need to not forget our people, our teams have expectations, mainly during crisis. And we have been extremely focused on keeping our people safe, keeping our people motivated, staying connected with them, and of course, taking them through this painful time in which people have been, all of us, living on uncertainty.
There are a lot of changes going on in the world. Of course, pandemic is only one of those. There are also geopolitics and technological advancement. And you are taking both the chairmanship and also the CEO role at this critical moment from your predecessor. I mean, this must have been a lot of pressure, how you are coming in to this current situation, which is unknown to everyone. But at the time, you also have to encourage everyone on your team so that they could be hopeful.
Absolutely. I have already labeled myself as part of the first promotion of COVID and post-COVID CEOs. and
That's an
what
interesting
it means,
tag there you have.
What it means for us is that expectations have significantly raised in all fronts. Innovation, right? The speed at which innovation is being delivered during the pandemic has been changing everything. So all the standards, all the global standards for what is important to us that is going to secure our future has really raised. But at the end, the best way that I found to take people with me is to really be very present in the organization, communicate clearly what our priorities are, making sure that I listen to the organization. And I can tell you, I have invested so much time in the last 10 months connecting with people. I have traveled 500,000 kilometers from my Darmstadt office. I have met people in the factories, people in the R&D teams, country teams.
Amazing.
I do at least 2 of that every week.
Knowing the situation within the company is one thing, but the big environment that we are functioning right now is another thing, isn't it? I mean, right now, as if it is not enough task for Merck, you jump into businesses, electronic businesses that are closely linked to the global chip productions. Now, we all know there is a shortage of global chips, and there's also entangled geopolitics involved there. How do you see the current shortage? How much do you see the problems could be resolved?
There is no magic tool,
no,
right? And we are not going to change the world, but we can influence the world, and it's only by actively connecting with policymakers and major decision makers, explaining, educating, very transparently and factually, making them understood what do we need to actually serve the needs of our customers and the needs of our, of humanity overall. Is actually the best way. During the last 6 months, I have spent so much time talking to prime ministers and other policymakers who were extremely interested and intrigued, right, in engaging with the private sector to better understand our views on how could they support the acceleration of vaccine manufacturing. It's only by developing the trust that we need with these so critical stakeholders that we will be able to shape the future. Nevertheless, things are the way they are, and we need to also learn navigate in a much more volatile and uncertain environment. And I can tell you, we do that. It's part of our business. And I don't want to say the new normal because I don't really like this word. But talk about trade, talk about resilience of the supply chain. This is in the mind of everybody at this time, and we need to make sure that the principles to promote innovation, the principle of free global trade, intellectual property protection, all these are in the right place, enable the private sector to deliver innovation for humanity.
I really wondered whether the business community as a whole, not just yours, but business community as a whole, have been provided with the relevant politicians with the numbers if these kinds of abrupt disruption of supply chains and also so-called precise disconnection happens, what would that mean for businesses? What would that mean just for common folks who has a car, who need to pay the telephone bill or the electronic bill? I really wonder whether those messages have been clearly conveyed by the business community. Your thoughts?
Well, I can speak for Merck. And what I can tell you is that we have put significant efforts into understanding the consequences of the geopolitical trends and prepare to deal with those. We have a responsibility to society overall, right? And governments, policymakers, academia, our customers, and the public are our main audiences. In my mind, the biggest concern that I have, or the biggest objective that I have, is that we are a credible company, delivering contributions in any circumstances. That is what is driving me, making sure that our teams live this purpose and lead with this purpose driven approach, understanding the impact that we can create.
Even within companies themselves, sometimes there's balance of interest within different priorities. How do you see that within your company, for example?
Innovation is my top priority.
Yeah.
We address innovation fully understanding what are the trends, the technological, the science and technology trends, how our capabilities can fit and address those opportunities, and most importantly, making sure that our innovation model is absolutely adapted to capturing the uniqueness of Merck. And this speaks not only of the innovation model of our three sectors, but actually the potential value of those opportunities that could derive from the synergies coming from different sectors, which is what I call the uniqueness of Merck. So innovation reflected in an increasing percentage of new products on our revenues. And we have three major growth engines now expanding to new technologies like mRNA, expanding to services and semiconductors.
Right. That's really very rewarding for me as a journalist to understand how business leaders make their decision. What is that process for you? Let me just move on. I understand you delivered a speech at China Artificial Intelligence Conference. Now, how do you see the environment for innovation, science and technology development in this country?
I joined this company in 2011. China was a successful business. I had, from the very first minute, a clear vision for China. And I can tell you that in 5 years, China became a business that didn't make such a contribution to the whole healthcare business at the time, to becoming the second largest and the fastest growing. And that was because, first of all, because we understood, how can we serve Chinese citizens? Everything started from the vision, but we have given great illustrations of the way we have anticipated the opportunities both in innovation, as you mentioned, and in new technologies. And, the explosion of biotech, the number of cell therapy studies that are being now conducted in China, confirmed the assumptions that we have back then. And moving forward, we continue to see China as one of our top, if not the top, strategic priority to be able to contribute in all the three sectors. Healthcare innovation, which is an area in which we see tremendous opportunity. As a global specialty innovator, we are interested in progressing our oncology and immunology pipeline in China, and there is tremendous opportunity. I mentioned already the huge investments that we have made in the semiconductor solution, in expanding our business there, and definitely for our life science business, China is an uncharted territory. We are doing well. We are really growing, but I believe that following the wave of innovation, the explosion of biotech, the opportunity for our life science business in China is very significant.
I heard through the grapevine that you have a nickname even within your organization. No more, Madam, no more than 3 pages of PPT. No. It shows your efficiency. So tell me more about that.
You mean on PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, the PowerPoint. Yes.
Look, I believe that if the teams cannot tell me the story in 10 minutes without using slides, we are not really having the right conversation. Organizations are full of bureaucracy, and at the end, when you want to mobilize for growth, which is our main objective at this time, you have to make sure that you are a good role model of not bringing bureaucracy. So I don't ask for briefing documents. I don't ask for, obviously we need to prepare some topics, but just with the right information. And the discussion in the executive boardroom is extremely practical and absolutely focused on the elements that will help us make better decisions. And usually I prefer the conversation than the PowerPoint presentation, yes.
I hope this conversation is efficient enough for all of us. That's all we have for today. If you'd like to see more, search World Insight or check our YouTube channel. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook. I'm Tian Wei on behalf of the team. Thanks for watching.